In this week's episode of Dentside Depot, we're going to do something that I've always personally wanted to do, and that is figure out what would have been the absolute most expensive Ford truck that you could have bought in 1979. Not your favorite options, not your best options, just simply what would have been the absolute most expensive. So let's get right into it here today. I've done a complete investigation of the most expensive and least expensive trucks, and right off the bat you can eliminate anything that was two-wheel drive, especially regular cab trucks. They were not very expensive, like this F100 back in 1979. They were only about $5,000. So we are eliminating anything two-wheel drive right off the bat. They were not very expensive. One thing I did consider was, well, what about an F350 crew cab two-wheel drive truck? Well, they were also not even close to being the most expensive. So everything two-wheel drive, regular cab, super camper special, crew cab, not applicable, not expensive enough to be the most expensive truck. So then we have to look at regular cab four-wheel drive trucks, and you have three options. You have F150, F250 like this one right here, and then you also have F350. Four-wheel drive trucks in regular cab configuration could have all of the different trim levels and all of the options. So that was definitely possible that a regular cab could have been the most expensive, but they were not. I eliminated regular cabs. Even an F350 with four-wheel drive and all the goodies would not be the most expensive truck. So that brings us over to 4x4 crew cabs. Now 4x4 crew cabs were limited in what you could get. If you wanted a four-wheel drive crew cab, it had to be an F250. No F150 crew cab, no F350 crew cab in four-wheel drive, just F250 for the crew cabs and four-wheel drive. In addition, trim options were limited. Both of these trucks right here are Ranger XLTs. You could get custom or you could get Ranger XLT. There was no Ranger and there was no Lariat. So not having the Lariat being one of the most expensive options, that decreases their chances of potentially being the most expensive. In addition, you could not get the Dana 60 front axle on a crew cab. If you see one with the Dana 60 front, it's because someone has added it at some point. Also, crew cabs could not have cruise control. I have no idea why they made that decision, but you will not see any crew cabs with cruise control from the factory. They could have tilt, but they could not have cruise control. Besides that, most interior options, I believe all other interior options, were available on crew cabs. And then lastly, the 4x4 crew cabs were only available with 6-foot beds, and you would think that this wouldn't make a difference as far as the overall price, but it definitely does, and we will talk about that today, why the 6-foot bed significantly reduces the overall price of one of these trucks. So that brings us to super cabs. Now the unique thing about super cabs is that they were available in all four trims, being custom, Ranger, Ranger XLT, and Lariat. This X36 right here is a custom, and then this one over here is a Lariat from the factory. Now the base model F350 Super Cab 4x4 in '79 was $9,300. That's over $1,000 more than a top flight crew cab like these two right here, and that's about $1,000 more than an F350 regular cab. So our base model truck for the purpose of this video is going to be an X36. All right, so from there you then need to figure out what is going to be the most expensive trim, which is pretty obvious. While a custom truck could definitely be more expensive than a Lariat, because a Lariat could be essentially just a Lariat with heat, no AC, no other options, the Lariat package itself is extremely expensive at roughly $800. So having an $800 Lariat package and then adding all of the other options would be the best way to go as far as getting a total price. So let's go around everything. I'll give you the values as we go, bringing us all the way up to a total end cost of what would be your most expensive possible truck in 1979. I'll give you a hint, it's not the way I would personally option it, but it will be the most expensive. All right, let's start under the hood with the functional mechanical options that you could get that would make your truck the most expensive. Being a 4x4 truck, you had two engine options, F250, F350 that is. You had the 351M or some people call it the modified, and then you have the 400. Some people also call it the 400 modified. We have the 400 here. That would be your most expensive engine. You could not get the 460 with the four-wheel drive trucks. Paired with that, your most expensive transmission, there's only two options. It'd be the C6, so slightly more expensive than the new process manual transmission. Every single one would get an NP205. Every single one would get a Dana 60 rear and four-wheel drive. And then 79 F350 standard got the Dana 60 front axle. You would actually get a discount on further options that we're going to talk about here later on. Okay, now other things under the hood, and by the way, we are now at over $10,000 just being an X36 with a Lariat. Now from here, air conditioning was over $600. You have your dual battery option, which would add on another $100. Power steering would be an expensive option. Cruise control, which was not available in crew cabs, was about $150, I believe. And then super cooling would be a part of another package that was functional called Camper Special. Adding the Camper Special was a cost of about $200, but it did reduce some of the other costs associated with what we're talking today. If you notice that I don't mention an option, it's just because it was very cheap, like a $20 option. I wasn't going to go over it, like hubcaps or things like that. I did add all of those options in. I'm just not necessarily going to mention them here to keep the video to about 10 minutes. Other things that you would have would be auxiliary transmission and oil coolers. You would have engine block heaters, you know, and other little things like that that do add up, that I added all of those into the total price here today. So now let's take a look at the interior. Okay, in the interior, your most expensive options obviously would start with Lariat. That's where you would see all of the fancy trim and seat and their headliner and everything else. Very expensive for the Supercabs. Supercabs would also have the forward-facing rear seat, which would add another $200. Interestingly, what we're not going to add to this truck to make it the most expensive, we're not going to add fog lights, we're not going to add Cactus Smasher, and we're not going to add the GT roll bar in the bed. I will explain why later on. We are going to add security group, and we are also going to add protection group. You're going to have convenience group with delayed wiper. You're going to have tilt wheel. You're not going to have the GT wheel or the rally wheel or sport wheel, whatever you want to call it, but you are going to have the leather simulated wheel with the cruise control, horn pad, etc. You will have AM, FM stereo radio, and you will add the CB player, or excuse me, the CB radio. Total for those two is $537. Obviously, you're going to have HVAC controller, and we're going to talk about dual tank as well. Security group would add the locking dashboard or glove box. You would have the under dash lights, the better vanity mirror. We are also adding the flipper visor, and I believe that would be everything for the interior, which would bring our price up significantly for all of those options. Now let's go to the bed, which is where it gets really interesting. All right, so moving to the back of the truck, before I forget, also flipper windows is another additional cost that you can get on a Supercab that you wouldn't get on any other vehicle or any other cab size. I never really thought about this, but there's a lot of things with an 8-foot bed that significantly add to the total cost of the truck. Before we get into those, let me mention a couple other things. Chrome rear step bumper, the heaviest duty springs, as well as auxiliary springs, rear sway bar, which was a part of the Camper Special package, and then you can see under here there's our Camper Special harness for the rear. Now, things for the bed, and you can see this is a pre-77.5 bedside here. I have to change it. Tie down hooks. Tie down hooks would add about 50 bucks. Dual tanks would add another $180, although those were also available with short beds as well. But what you could not get with a short bed would have been the camper box, and that was another, I believe it was $170. But here's why I eliminated the Cactus Smasher, the fog lamps, and the GT bar for our total price, and that is because the single most expensive option that you could get with one of these trucks, including Ranger Lariat, would be the factory camper topper. and that camper topper was $800 in its best form, which is crazy expensive when you think about it. So you add that camper topper, you would also add the rear sliding window, and that would really bring up your total cost for all of this. A few more items of note after talking about the bed. The snowplow package was still an option on the F350, but you got credits back for having the F350 and then also for having Camper Special, so that would only cost about $100 to have the snowplow prep. You would also be able to option it with heavier duty shocks. Clearance lights would be another add-on option. They were roughly $40. That would bring your total up. And then that brings us to the last option I'm going to talk about today, and that is deluxe two-tone paint. You could get two-tone delete, you could get regular two-tone or deluxe two-tone, or then the combination of both. In this instance, we're going to do the combination of both, and then we're also going to add the glamour color. In 79, there were 3 glamour colors. My favorite is medium blue glow metallic. So we would add medium blue glow metallic as the primary, and then we'd do something like Wimbledon white or silver or whatever you would feel would be best for your secondary color. And that would wrap up every single possible option that would be of significant value to our total. So let's take a look here at all of those together and see what we came out to. Okay, so here is the total of what would be all of our options today. You can see we started with a 79 F350 Super Cab 4x4 at $9,300. We added the 400 engine, the auto trans, a few other options. Then you have the Lariat at $793, dual battery, 70 amp alternator, the pickup box cover, which was $769, chrome rear step bumper, emissions, security group, aux tank, snow plow prep after credits, power steering, tie down hooks, tool stowage box, air conditioning, clearance lights, forgot to mention tinted glass, light group, the radios, cruise control, tilt wheel, rear seat, vanity mirror, flipper windows, and all the other things I mentioned, glamour paint, regular and deluxe two-tone, protection group, leather wrapped wheel, and Camper Special. And that brought us to a total of $15,662, and in today's money that would be $65,756. So you can see that this would have been a very expensive truck in 1979 for sure. This one right here is very close to that from the factory, although less. I highly doubt that any truck ever cost that much, but maybe pretty close. This one certainly was. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Dentside Depot, figuring out what our most expensive truck would have been in 1979. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode.